and welcome to episode 5 of In Suspense, our new video podcast or vodcast for fans of crime fiction. I'm Lauren North and my co-host is the amazing Leslie Cara. And you'll notice that we've swapped roles today and I'm doing the introduction. I'm a bit nervous and we'll probably talk too fast, but especially next to Leslie, who's a bit more of a pro at this than I am. But our last episode, we interviewed ourselves on our journeys to publication. So do check that out if you haven't done so already, either watching or listening. And I don't know about you, Leslie, but I found it really inspiring listening back over what we talked about, because I think I just get so wrapped up in all the day-to-day, this chapter, this edit, next book, next idea. And I think I forget that how far I've come in such a short space of time, really.
I know, I feel the same way. I really enjoyed listening to that back when, and hearing what we said, because, if you'd asked me if you'd said to me 5 years ago, you'll be chatting to Lauren North on a podcast and talking about books and waiting for your third book to come out, I wouldn't have believed you. And I think when you're going through it, when you're sort of in your first 2 books being published and everything, it's such a roller coaster, isn't it, that you get swept up in it and you forget a lot of the detail. And so looking back on it, it's great to remind ourselves of how far we've come, really, and what we've achieved. I suppose the trouble is, once you've published a book, those goalposts keep moving, don't they?
Yeah, they do, those pesky goalposts. Yeah, definitely. Funnily enough, if you'd asked me 5 years ago that I'd even be Lauren North, I'd be like, who?
Oh yes, because you're Laurie Ellingham, really, aren't you?
Yes. It's funny how things can change so quickly, really. I think we measure it based on when we first started writing back a decade ago, and forget that actually things pick up momentum, don't they? So
that's right, because a decade ago all I really wanted was to get an agent, and that was that was it. I thought, well, once I've got an agent I'll be fine. And then of course then you've got to get the publishing deal, and then when you've got the book, you get, oh God, is it going to sell? What's going to happen?
Yeah, I think my big dream all along has always been to see my book in a supermarket. That was always like a really big one for me. And actually, when I went, I was like, all right, yeah, so I've done that now. Right, come on, what's next? So there's no stopping to enjoy it, I don't think.
No.
Yes.
I think it's even nicer to see your book in bookshops as well. Waterstones and nice little independent bookshops, and you just suddenly catch sight of it on the shelf and you think, oh.
Yes, and I walked past Frinton's bookshop a few times, like, oh look, there's your book. No, it is lovely. Yeah, really good.
So gosh, yes, what are we talking about next? I've lost the plot.
I know, it's me.
Oh, is it you? Do you know, we're not our usual self today, which we'll explain about later. We've had a funny couple of weeks.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to say that I've finished reading your book, The Dare, on the same day of our last recording, and I just really loved it, Leslie. It was just, it blew me away. Just the tension was just charged throughout, and it was just an unstoppable read. So well done, and thank you very much for that, because it was fantastic. I loved it.
Oh, thank you so much. That means such a lot to hear you say that, because as you know, I really, really struggled to finish that novel during lockdown. And there were times when I actually was despairing. I thought, I'm never going to get this second half done. So it's really lovely to hear you say that. And it's quite scary actually when your book goes out into the world, isn't it? And know, people post pictures of it on their sort of to be read piles and things, and you think, oh no, that bit never gets any easier, does it? The worry about how your book is going to land and whether people are going to enjoy it or not. So
and how it's going to compare to the last book. Because if people love the last book, you think it doesn't help actually with the next one. Because you think, oh no, maybe they've got such high expectations of the next one.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's a great relief. So thank you very much. I'm really pleased you enjoyed it. Well, what have you been up to then this last week?
Well, I was a bit under the weather the week that we did the last recording, and was ill all week, and ended up having a COVID test.
Oh.
which came back negative. But I had it for a week, and then Tommy, my boy, who gets asthma, really, it hit him really hard. So then we've had another week on steroids and playing board games and keeping warm. So it's been quite quiet, and I'm just sort of can feel the build up of nerves now for my structural edits to come back from my editor, because I made quite a lot of changes, and I'm sort of expecting to have to do a few more bits. So I don't think it's going to go straight to copy edit. So yeah, I'm starting to feel a bit nervous about that. I'm hoping this week I might hear something about that. So that's it. And then I've just been working with my agent on a different book, editing a different book that's yes,
Are you allowed to tell us anything about that, or is it top secret?
It's not really top secret. It's a romance, so it's a bit different. I just wrote it over the summer holidays, just something a bit lighter. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with it yet. We're still quite early on in the process, but yeah, it's been quite a different experience for me. So
Lovely.
yeah, but I can't wait to get my teeth back into something a bit dark and meaty again. So yeah, not that I should say romances are still really hard to write as well, especially when you've been writing dark fiction, because you think that everyone's suddenly going to be out to get everybody, and you have to remember that people are nice. Yes. So yeah, it comes with so many different challenges, but it's still trying to get that connection with the characters and things like that. So yeah, it's not easier, it's just different, I suppose.
No, just different. Yeah.
What about you? What have you been up to?
Oh, I've had a really difficult couple of weeks, actually. I mean, the last time we got together for this, as you know, I wasn't feeling that well either. You had your cold, didn't you? And I was suffering from vertigo and things like that. That's eased off now. That's better. But my dad's been really poorly and been in and out of hospital and hasn't had sort of adequate care package at home. So I've been sort of really helping him, looking after him, and it's been really, really challenging, actually. And I'll probably sort of tear up in a moment, but it's just exhausting, isn't it, when you're looking after someone and seeing someone suffer and hearing them cry out in pain. It's just horrible. But thankfully he's on the right antibiotics now, so hopefully things will start to get better for him. I mean, he's 92, so he's very frail. So as a result, I haven't really done any writing this week. I mean, I did manage to do some yesterday, and that was nice, just to have a few hours writing.
Must have felt quite therapeutic.
Yeah, I don't know about you, I get quite low if I can't write. And obviously I was putting my dad first, rightly so, and I wanted to do that, but I really missed having those sort of solid sort of writing hours. So hopefully as he gets better and we get more carers coming in to help him, I will have more time for writing. But on a positive note, I mean, I did some, it was kind of before my dad got really poorly, I did a couple of online live events, and they were fun, a bit scary, but fun.
Oh yeah, you took over Instagram, didn't you?
Well, I didn't take over the whole of Instagram, but that would be a coup. But I took over the Waterstones Instagram.
Oh right,
yeah, which was a little bit scary. And it's funny, I was thinking about this because I've done lots of live events last year that aren't as scary, because when you're doing an actual event and you've got people in front of you, you can see their reactions, and you can hear if the audience is responding, and you can see their faces, if they're smiling in the right place, if they're looking bored, you know what to sort of do. But when you're doing one of these Instagram lives, all you can see is your own mug, staring back at you. And of course people comment, don't they? And so, but it's hard to talk and remember what you're going to say and read the comments at the same time.
Yeah.
And we were told to disable the comments because sometimes those things get hijacked by trolls, unfortunately. Oh, yeah. So, but I interviewed Francine Toon, who wrote Pine, which is the Waterstones thriller of the month, and it was a lovely conversation. We talked about Halloween and witches and all the things, because she's written a gothic thriller. And I was so relieved when the technology worked and she was actually there. But so that was fun. It was a nice thing to do. That was good. So I enjoyed doing that.
Well, I'm glad you've had a few positive things this week.
Yeah, there have been some positive things. What else did I do? Oh, no, I was going to say, I know what I was going to say. I was going to say that now that I've done a couple of those, and maybe you've done a couple, I'm not sure, we'll feel confident one day to do this podcast live. What do you think?
I say
I'm not suggesting we do. I'm just saying maybe.
Well, I think we could. Yeah, I think we could maybe like a special episode live. That would be quite good, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe one day, maybe in a couple of series. Oh. Well, I'm glad that you were able to make it today, and I'm glad that your dad has turned a bit of a corner. So fingers crossed that continues. But on with the show, I guess.
Yes, definitely on with the show.
Today's topic is working with a digital publisher, which I'm really interested in. As I said last episode, I started out working with a digital publisher in a different genre. And I think what's really great about digital publishers is that you often don't need an agent. So that's one less door you've got to batter down to sort of get that experience and that foot in the door. I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah, well, no, we're both not 100% today. You can tell.
Hold off then.
But we'll battle on. We'll struggle. No, I think what amazes me about digital publishing is that digital only publishing is that people bring out maybe 2 or 3 books a year, which is incredible. I mean, I'm in awe of anybody who can write 2 to 3 books a year, because I struggle with writing 1 a year. I really do. But I was thinking it must be a great way of growing a readership really quickly, because you've got that audience of readers sort of ready and waiting and wanting the next one quickly.
Yeah, and there's certainly so many success stories of authors who are with these publishers who are, selling millions of copies and climbing up the charts. I mean, that wasn't my experience. I'm really looking forward to talking to our guest today about how they have found their experience was getting better than mine. But yeah, it was it's a really interesting area, isn't it? And it's certainly there are lots of digital publishers now as well. So it's and
our guest today will know all about that, because we are speaking to none other than SE Lines.
Hello and welcome to SE Lions. We are so excited to have you on the show. So I'm going to start with, sorry, got Rodney the dog here patting me. I'm going to start with a little bio of you, Susie. So Susie is a former producer and Amazon best-selling author. Over the past 3 years, she's published 8 books with the award-winning digital publisher Bookouture. She's sold hundreds and thousands of copies. She's had her novels translated into multiple languages and has topped the Amazon charts on numerous occasions. So thank you very much for joining us today, especially as your publication date for The Housewarming was only last week. So happy publication day. I finished reading it last week and loved it. The way that you wove that guilt and emotion so tightly through the book, I really thought it was going to snap at one point. It really got me. So really impressed and just loved it. So thank you. So do you want to start by telling us a little bit about The Housewarming?
Yeah, sure. It's a psychological suspense novel. It's a domestic noir. I guess you could call it a suburban noir if you wanted to. And it turned out to be an out and out tragedy. It's about, on the surface, a missing child, and it is from the point of view, mostly at the point of view of the mother. A year later, and I think it's also about love and community and friendship. And it was written during lockdown and inspired by the play All My Sons by Arthur Miller. There's the title of that play relates to the very famous line from that play where the father realizes his guilt in taking care of his own family. He has failed to realize that, all men were his sons in that instance. And I guess I was looking, in the time of COVID, I was looking at our collective responsibility for one another and that somebody else's vulnerable grandparent is your grandparent too. And that really, I think, psychologically was what was going on with me when I wrote it.
Oh, that sounds really fascinating. I can't wait to read it. But our topic this week is working with a digital publisher. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what it's like working with Bookouture and bringing out your books with them, because I've heard great things about Bookouture. So it would be really nice to have your sort of take on that.
Yes, well, I was just looking at the questions before we started to chat, just sort of reminding myself what they might be. And I've got on a piece of paper here, I've got Bookouture, I've got dynamic, professional, forward-thinking, kind, future, fun, and supportive. So that's what I've got written on my piece of paper, and I think that that's what they like to work for. They are tremendously forward-thinking. I think they have got a business model that allows them to be dynamic and fast, but also kind. If I ever email my editor, I always get a reply the same day. When you hand in your work, it feels like a team of people get lowered down from a helicopter on ropes. And 3 months later, your book is out there in the world. It is incredible. They are incredible.
That's so impressive, and the speed that they can turn it around as well. Now, I imagine writing 2 books a year, though, can't leave you much wiggle room for if you decide to scrap it halfway through. So are you quite a planner, Susie? How much do you work with your editor in that planning?
Well, I think the thing is, once you become a professional writer, things change a little bit, as you know, and you kind of submit a synopsis, and that's no different. So I submit my synopsis, and if it's too whack ball, then they might bat it back to me and just say, look, that's great, but you need something a little bit more tangible, because I'm often a bit out there with my ideas, and so they will help me refine my idea so that I can still express what I want to express, but perhaps do it in a better commercial setting. As far as this, so I do plan a wee bit, because I have to hand in the synopsis, and so I do work now from a synopsis, which is probably better, but I am quite a pantser, so things tend to happen in the writing as well. And sometimes, well, let's say always, I will have thrown a twist in right at the end that my editor doesn't know about. And in the case of Can You See Her, that went back and to a bit, and I fought for it, and I won my final twist in the end. And then as regards the 2 books a year thing, I haven't found that a struggle quite yet, but I know that if I did, that would be fine. They are kind, they are supportive, and if you did have a problem, they would talk. You could talk to them, and it would be delayed. My deadline next time is a lot further away than it has been in the past, and the main result of that so far seems to be that I've just procrastinated more. So I taught creative writing for 11 years, and I know my students think I don't know, but I always knew that they were procrastinating, and the only time they did anything was when they had a deadline, and deadlines are the most creative thing in the world.
Well, that's so interesting. And you've just signed another 2 books with Bookouture, so congratulations on that. So obviously, as what you've said, and that shows how happy you are there. We often see questions come up in Tracy Buchanan's Savvy group from authors who perhaps have a traditional deal on the table and a digital deal. And what advice would you give to an author in that situation?
I think you have to be really honest with yourself about what you want. And if I'm going to be really honest about what I am saddened sometimes that the digital world has not yet made it in terms of being recognized in things like major competitions. the authors perhaps in major events, and when quite often the digital option, how do I phrase this? The digital option often means that you have the best chance of earning a living from your writing. And that then feeds into ideas surrounding class. I would love to be I would perhaps love to have been considered for prizes along the way, but that isn't my world yet. But I do think that it's coming, and I think that the digital world will eventually probably take over ecologically, in terms of expense, in terms of sales, etc. Libraries closing down. It represents a very affordable option for people who really do devour fiction.
And I wonder whether...
I've gone off the point. I'm so
Don't
sorry.
worry. I was going to say, I wonder whether this, the whole business with COVID and lockdown will sort of hasten that move more towards digital. Do you think that may happen?
Yes, possibly so. And I do think increasingly, a paperback book is now sort of around the £10 mark, and I think it's beginning to represent something valuable in terms of the giving of gifts, because I don't know how many people can afford to buy themselves a paperback a week at £10, whereas the digital ones come in, as you know, less. But in terms of the question that you asked me, which I haven't answered, which is the advice I would give to an author, I would say be honest about what you want most, and recognize that you will not be able to get everything from one publisher. And for me, I thought that what was most important to me was to have my books in paperback form in all the Waterstones in the land. And now, 8 books in, I have enjoyed being able to have some financial independence and some a sense of an achievement, and having my own real job. And that has allowed me to think of it really as my main job. And I have grown in confidence hugely as a result of that, from a position where with my debut, I could barely publish it. I had to have counselling in order to bring it out because I was so afraid. And I've gone from that to progressively losing less and less weight with each publication day, to this time didn't lose any weight at all and got a full night's sleep the night before, which is for me extraordinary. It's still nerve-wracking. I've still eaten all my nails, but at least I didn't have a minor breakdown this time. And so I am obviously growing in confidence, and that's got to be a good thing.
Well, that's great. And at the end of the day, it's about readers, isn't it? And whether you come out digital only or in paperback or hardback, what you really want when you write a book is for people to read it and enjoy it. And they certainly read and enjoy your books, don't they? So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and given that I couldn't sell a book to my own mother, they are much better at selling books than I am. So I'll let them do that because they're very good at it.
It's funny, but when we were preparing for this interview with you, I thought that I hadn't actually read any of your books. And so I thought, I must read up on S.E. Lines because, Lauren had told me how brilliant your books were. And then when I was reading about you and I saw that your first novel, your debut, was Valentina, I thought, oh my God, I read that was it 2016? Yes. And I absolutely loved it. I read it on my Kindle. I think I was ill at the time and it absorbed me and I loved it so much. So I was really pleased that I had read one of your books. And in that book, in Valentina, the main character, I think she was called Shona, wasn't she? And in that book, she moved to Aberdeenshire, a rural part of Aberdeenshire, and with her partner, who was away. I think he was working offshore, wasn't he, on an oil rig, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And so the main character, I won't tell the plot, obviously, because I think people should read it because it's a great book. But she was very isolated, and things started happening, didn't she? And she got befriended somebody. But I was just wondering, because when I read about your biography, it said that you too moved to Aberdeen with your husband. And I was wondering whether you experienced that same sense of isolation, and was it that got you writing? Was it that inspired you to write that novel?
I didn't start writing due to isolation. I think I started writing out of a deep need to create, and I had been at the BBC as a radio producer, and so I was creating radio programs, and I was at home with children. We were offered the chance to go to Rome, to live in Rome for 5 years, and it was a terrific opportunity. And I had two really, really young children at the time. They were 1 and 2. And, I was struggling to keep hold of my job and my health at that time. And so I just thought, why not, let's go to Rome, let's do this. And obviously you get there and you've got no mates, and, you've got a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old for company. And yes, so partly a wee bit of isolation, although, Italians are really friendly and I made a lot of friends, but more because I need to create, otherwise I start to feel really sick and emotionally, and that's probably just emotional sort of upset. And so I started to write children's books for them. So I wrote loads of children's books for them, which bizarrely, once Valentina had been published and another couple of books had been published, I then got a call to say that they were being published, my children's books were being published in Italy. So it really is that, you wait for a bus for 3 years and then all the buses arrive at once scenario. But as regards Valentina, I not only moved to Aberdeen to be with my husband, to get married to my husband, he was working offshore.
Oh.
And I was desperately lonely. I had no friends, I had no job, and I went out and got a job as a waitress, and just to get out of the house, and eventually started recording pieces for the BBC, etc., and then made really firm friends there. But I have got that experience of moving around, so to Italy, and then to Scotland, and then to Italy, and then to Teddington, and all 3 times arriving with young children and no friends whatsoever, and no job either, and so no sense of status or self at all. And so rather than make Shona weak, I wanted to make her strong but flawed, because I thought that was something that I could draw from my own experience, that she sort of had nothing to say for herself. And then I had to just build in why on earth she would choose to live in a cottage in the woods, because I wouldn't. I'd be in the town.
Yes, I think I would as well. And funny, what you were saying there about feeling quite low when you're not writing and feeling isolated, I felt exactly the same when I moved to the coast from London. And that's when I started writing and wrote Who Did You Tell? Because I'd got a job. I resigned from my full-time job as a teacher and a manager, and I think I was just sort of doing a little part-time job and writing. And and I think also moving to another setting, like you've been to Aberdeen, you've been to Rome, moving around can give you perspective on the place that you've just left, can't it? So I think, and setting is so important in a novel, isn't it? Particularly.
Yes, and I think before you break through, and what I would say to anybody who's trying to break through is, I think if you can find it in yourself to describe yourself as a writer. My kids have told me that this is called manifesting. But people would say, what do you do? And I used to say, I'm a writer. And that was a bit ouchy at first, but I then behaved like a writer. So I would sit down and write every single day. And so when people said, do you want to come for a cup of coffee? I would say, no, I'm writing. I write in the mornings, so no. And then it became the case.
That's so interesting, how you describe yourself, isn't it? Like, I often describe myself as, I write books, but I don't ever say I'm an author, because it just seems so pretentious, doesn't it? But I just write. But I had a question about, you've written a couple of blog posts recently, Susie, which have really resonated with me and quite a lot of authors, I think, about the questions that hopefully well-meaning people, I think, ask all of us without really realising that they can be a bit rude or hurtful. So what's the worst question that you find that you get asked? And if you weren't as kind and lovely as you are, what would your answer be?
You know, I like that you think I'm kind and lovely, because that's because you've only ever seen me on social media. But I try not to be offended, because I try and come from the point of departure that nobody says it on purpose to upset you.
Mm.
And you know, I know somebody who's GP who every time she goes to a party, somebody says, "Oh, I've got this spot on my neck. Will you have a look?" Or, you know, "I've got this really gammy toe." She's like, "I'm just trying to have a gin and tonic." So I think you have to take it in the context of that they don't mean offence, and they also have no idea just how hard it is not only to break through as an author and get that publishing deal, but also how hard it is to stay published, you know, to get another contract and another contract. And so my question, as you know, that riles me a wee bit is, will you always write thrillers? You know, from the point of departure that they're not real books. And when you think about, you know, when you think about something like Sarah Vaughan's Anatomy of a Scandal, you know, with its analysis of sexism, privilege, class, Me Too, before Me Too was a thing, you know, that's a thriller. But and I always try and explore something through my thrillers. In Valentina, it was loneliness and loyalty, and really asking the question, is it worse to be betrayed by your love interest or your friend? Which is worse, platonic or romantic betrayal? Because I think I have an inkling that deep down we expect more from females. We expect more from our women friends and from friendship. So that question, will you always write thrillers, is one that I try not to be annoyed at. And it's Helen Mirren that said if she had her time again, she'd have told people to F off. I'm not saying that I would ever say that, but there's that. And then I think it's, other than that, it's comments like, "Oh, you're really churning them out." There is, "I really must get around to reading your book, because I'd be doing you a really big favour." So there's that I find those sorts of things annoying, but the churning them out is possibly, in terms of offhand comments, is the most annoying, because I don't say to somebody who does another job, like a clothing designer or I can't think of anything else, but people who sit and who are professional in whatever industry, they are producing work. And if I sit down every single day and produce work, it is because that's my job, that's what I do. And so it's a strange, I mean, I get it if you're bringing out a book every 6 weeks, but I'm not, you know.
No, that's deeply offensive, isn't it? I find that churning out, and you blood, sweat, and tears go into your books, don't they? And it's. I think also, if it was so easy to write a novel, why aren't they doing it? Why it's all very well to say that, but I think people just don't understand. But it's difficult, isn't it? People don't always know what to say to writers, I think, and they're either obsessed with how much we earn, or how quickly we can write books, or and as you say, getting round to reading it one day. That's, you'd rather they didn't say anything at all than say that.
I always get asked in the village, actually, when I'm walking the dog, they're like, "Oh, are you writing at the moment? Are you writing another book?" I was like, "Well, yes, I'm always writing another book. It never stops." It's like, I think they just see it as, it kind of makes me think like they think it's a hobby. And I think that's that undercurrent there, isn't there, of how they see us, I think.
Mm-hmm. And given that most writers work, I mean, I worked for the first few years, I was still teaching. And it's only really recently that I gave that up. I still do a little bit of mentoring, but I had to give up the teaching because of the deadlines. But also, it was time. I've been teaching for 11 years, and it was time for me to move into this. And I think, I mean, if you sit down at your desk and work for several hours a day, you will produce books. You will produce them, and you probably can. I don't think I'd do quite 2 a year. It seems like I've done 2 a year, but I think that's a bit of clever sleight of hand. But certainly I can write a book in 6 months if I really, really go for it and work really, really hard. And I think if my deadline is further this time, it's because I think maybe at the end of 8 books, I've sort of earned a little bit. I've earned the right just to take a breather and have my hall decorated.
You mentioned just now about mentoring, that you're not teaching anymore, but that you mentor. So what's actually involved in mentoring other authors? How does that differ from teaching? What sort of support do you give?
It's very similar to the teaching because I've always taught at the adult. I've always taught adults, and so I guess it's a tailored one-to-one teaching. But when I was teaching, I always gave a one-to-one feedback to all my students. So I would always take on board what it was they were trying to do, what kind of work they wanted to achieve, and I was always tailoring my teaching towards what they needed from me in terms of advice. So for example, it doesn't really matter where you start on the spectrum of learning. You might not be able to organize your thoughts into a scene, and so that's where my focus would be for that student, that it's just a sort of internal monologue for 30 pages, and then another student might be absolutely already there, pretty much, but they might have a tendency to, for example, flip back to the remote past tense when actually they'd have been better off just starting there and moving forward rather than continually flipping back. So they might just need that sort of direction, and that can be them off. So yes, it's just a one-to-one approach, but my 2 sort of mentoring students at the moment, one of them I see very, very occasionally, and she's a former student who was very, very badly affected when she was run over by a lorry, and she was paralysed for a couple of years, and when she first came into my class was used a Zimmer to walk with, and she doesn't breathe too well, so she doesn't have enough breath quite often. And so I've been working with her on her story and trying to fictionalize her story with her, and she wants it to be funny. So, but I get it and I understand why she wants to do that, and so I work with her on sort of that interplay between the humorous, dark humor in it and the moments of pathos. And then I'm mentoring another guy at the moment who has had for 40 years very severe mental health difficulties, and has suffered with some very severe and very extreme, and I'm trying to help him put his story together in a series of vignettes that we're hoping one day to get it in front of a mental health publisher, because it is an absolute personal experience of severe mental illness. And he's got the stories and he's got the words. I just have to help him get them onto the page and help him fill in the blanks, because he has quite an episodic way of giving the information. So I'm working with him. I meat him every couple of weeks and we go through his work together.
That sounds really rewarding. It sounds a great thing to do. Yeah, because writing is a great therapy, really, isn't it? It can be. Fabulous.
Yeah, and lovely to be able to give back like that as well, I imagine. So yeah, that's really impressive. My next question was about books, funnily enough, since we're talking about books. What are you reading at the moment, Susie, or what are you looking forward to reading? You've got anything on the go?
Well, I've just finished the audiobook of Where the Crawdads Sing, which I really would recommend as an audiobook, particularly because you get that, somebody's reading to you in the headphones, and I'm like, wow, I could listen to this all day. The voice is just... and I'm about to read My Dark Vanessa. I'm reading The Spinning Heart by Donal Ryan. Not reading any thriller. I'm not reading thriller. I do read thrillers, and I know I should read more, but I find them very distracting to my own process, and I'm always horrified if I spot that somebody else has used the same or similar. I just finished reading the brilliant Apple Tree Yard, because I'd seen it on the television, and was half fascinated, half horrified to see that she had also used the monkey experiment, which I use in the housewarming. And I thought, oh, flipping heck, you know, we all know a good sort of idea when we see one. And I thought, you've used that as well. But because has come later, I just thought, oh, bugger. But you can't, there's always going to be some overlap, I think.
Was it Roland Barthes who, I think it was him, who said there's no original thought, is there? We're just, but in a sense it doesn't matter because we all handle similar topics but in very different ways, so I guess that doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think I just read a book actually, Susie, that a character said sod should, so I think that was quite that was in the housewarming, wasn't it? So I think that really resonated with me, all the things I think I should do. And actually, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. I think I always feel like I should be reading more, but I can only read what I get through. So
yeah, I mean, I know many writers who seemingly are just reading everything by everyone. Must give a special shout to Carla Kovac, who just reads relentlessly and is a relentless source of support. And I just feel so guilty that I'm not able to do that back. But, you know, we've all got lots of plates to spin, I guess, and we just have to, and I think writers do understand. But yeah, so sod should is a good one. And it comes back down to what people say to you without meaning to offend. They'll say, oh, you should. So that gets a little bit on my nose sometimes. And Roland Barthes is a great one. I like his Death of the Author, the idea that, you know, once you give your story to the world, the truth behind your story or what your story is about is no longer what you think it's about. It's whatever your reader thinks it's about. I love that idea that it exists in as many versions as there are readers.
Yeah, me too. I think that's one of the special things about writing a book, is that it changes the minute it's in someone else's hand. I think that's amazing. What about you, Leslie? What are you reading?
Well, I haven't, because I've had quite a difficult couple of weeks. I haven't actually read as much as I had hoped. The one I recently finished was Pine, because I was interviewing Francine Toon and I loved that. And then I finally got round to The Hunting Party, Lucy Foley. So I've just started that. So that's great. And my next one is The Jigsaw Man that I'm going to read. I think I talked about that in a previous episode, but as I say, I'm woefully behind on my TBR pile, I'm afraid, because of, you know, everything else that's been happening. And like you, I feel terribly guilty because, you know, I've got all these proofs to read and it's impossible to get round to them all and juggle everything. So we can only do what we can do, can't we? So
yeah. Oh, is it me now? Am I going to?
It is, yes.
Oh, so with the next thing, we at that point in the show where we like to ask a little bit of a fun question. So with S.J. Watson, we asked him what's the worst thing he's forgotten because of his Before I Go to Sleep. So because the housewarming and a lot of your books involve telling a lie or not telling the truth, we wondered what's the worst, best lie you've ever told to get you in or out of something?
You know, this is such a tough question because, you know, a close friend of mine recently said to me, you live your life as if you've taken some sort of a truth drug. He said, you really do need to learn to lie a bit more often. And I think my lies tend to be small lies and they are constant and all the, you know, they're just, my biggest lie, I think, is no worries. And because when I say no worries, when I say it or when I reply to a text with no worries, quite often behind the scenes I am either I'm crushed or disappointed, and I'm in a constant process of trying to hide my emotional investment in relationships that I have and trying not to admit to how disappointed I am, which might admit to, you know, vulnerability. I mean, yeah, no worries, you know. And also I think, you know, I have suffered from anxiety in the past, and I would say I only get as anxious as the next person now, but for a time I did properly suffer from it. And so years of sort of things like CBT and things like that have helped me to process my own feelings of sort of disappointment, or perhaps if you you know, somebody doesn't reply to a text, you know, 2 days later, you know, I no longer, well, even if I do take that personally, I know how to sort of get myself out of that loop. So I'm good on loops as well as lies. And my main sort of getting myself into hot water, it was really from living in Italy, because I would just pretend that I understood what everybody was talking about before I could understand what people were talking about. And so somebody would say something, and I would take my cue half a second behind everybody else and go, yeah, sì, assolutamente. And about 5 minutes later, somebody would then ask me a question relating to the thing that I hadn't understood. And of course, I would have to fess up that I had no idea what anybody was talking about.
Oh, that's so funny. Go on then, Leslie, have you got one?
Oh gosh, I've told a few little white lies. I'm not sure I could confess to them all. I mean, I did lie on an application form once. I know. I pretend, because I did my well, back when I did my they were called O levels when I did them, O levels and A levels, and I got really good grades in all my O levels except maths. It was the one subject that I did a CSE in. They were called CSEs in those days. They were the poor relation of the O level. So I'd got this raft of very impressive grades at O level, and then this very shameful CSE grade 3 in maths, which was dreadful. But a CSE grade 1 is equivalent to an O level grade C, I think, or it was.
I see where you're going.
So you can see where I'm going, can't you? And before I put this on the form, I just made sure I phoned up the exam board to see if they'd got a record of my exams, and they said, "Oh no, sorry, it was too long ago. That's how old I am, back in the days of yore." So I just sort of said I'd got a grade 1. Isn't that awful? Isn't that terrible? Awful.
And it didn't come back to bite you, though. They didn't need you to do math.
I mean, it might do now if someone's listening, but you know, what can they do? It's in the past now. So that was I'm a little bit ashamed of that, but you know, it didn't matter in the end. I thought, you know, if you're going to be a writer, you do make things up sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, it comes with the job, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, and there was a funny one as well. I once dyed my hair. I thought I was going to. My hair's been every colour under the sun. And I was in my early 20s, and I tried to dye it blonde, and I didn't read the instructions properly, and it turned mauve. My hair literally turned mauve. And so I had to pretend that I didn't want to phone up work and say, my hair is mauve. So I had to make out I was ill and pretend to be ill. So I had the day off work. I went to a hairdresser's, had to pay a lot of money to get them to put it back, and of course it was still a different colour, so I ended up having to tell the truth the next day anyway, because when I went back to work my hair was kind of mink coloured. So yeah, so me and white lies, not good.
Oh dear.
What about you, Laurie? I've confessed all now, so it's your turn.
Oh yeah, it's what you can confess, isn't it? I think who's going to watch and listen to this? There was one when I was trying to impress a boy in my 20s who quite likes football. I was like, oh yeah, I like football. And before I would see him on a date, I'd go on to BBC Sport and just drum up a little bit of information, just a tiny bit, sort of start a conversation, so it sounded like I knew what I was talking about. And so I was on a date, and I said, "Oh, so how do you think Chelsea are going to get on against the Forest then at the weekend?" And he just turned to me and said, "So which Forest would that be?" And I just had no information. I didn't know which Forest. I think I was sort of Thetford, Alverden, not realising that it was Nottingham Forest was the team. But yeah, so that I was rumbled very quickly in that, which was handy for me because I married him. So he doesn't expect any knowledge now.
Oh dear. I think it's about time, isn't it, Laurie, for your quick fire? Is it time for your quick fire round? You're going to put Susie on the spot.
Yes, I've got to find them first. Oh dear. Oh yes, I've got them. Yes, are you ready, Susie, for your quick fire questions? All right. So are you old-fashioned phone call or Zoom?
Old-fashioned phone call.
Do you prefer PJs or dressy?
PJs or dressy in what sense?
Or like dressy up clothes, like going out, or are you happier in your PJs?
Oh, I'm ambi, both.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Wine, beer or cocktail?
Beer.
Computer or notebook?
Computer.
Starter or dessert?
Starter.
Word or scrivener?
Word.
Cat or dog?
Dog.
Run or bike ride?
Run.
Beach holiday or city break?
Beach.
And would you have a cozy dinner for two, or are you an out?
Again, ambi.
You do both with you. All right, well, thank you very much. Well done.
You've done very well, Susie. Thank you. And thank you so much for being our guest today. We've really enjoyed having you on. And did the housewarming, did it come out last week? Was it last week? So yeah, so everybody get a copy of that, because that's
won't be disappointed. Fantastic.
Sounded great when you were talking about that. So I'm really looking forward to reading that one. And also, if you haven't read the others, then there's how many is it? Is it 8 now? That's your 8th, isn't it? Yeah. So brilliant. Okay, so thank you for listening and watching, everybody. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so, because apparently if we get 100 subscribers, we get a more user-friendly URL. Now, I haven't got much clue of what that is actually, but I think we want one. Whatever it is, don't we, Laurie? We want one. We want an
I think so, yeah. Is that like when you get 50 reviews on Amazon, they send you a magic unicorn?
I think so. But yeah, no, it's been a real pleasure. And do you know, we've only got one more episode left before it's the end of season 1. Can you believe that, Laurie? That we've practically done a whole season already.
I know. I'm so excited to interview our next guest on our last episode of series 1, which is so incredible to say. And we'll keep an eye on our Twitter account, which is @InSuspensePod, because we will put a few clues on there on who our next guest is going to be. But obviously, in the meantime, we're not going to tell you. We're going to leave you in
suspense. Hey, we actually synchronized it. Yay!
Almost.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Susie. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Susie. Bye-bye.